What's wrong with eating animals if they're humanely raised?
From a humane perspective, I think that the factory farming industry is an ethical nightmare. And I want nothing to do with it, with my dollars, with my ethics, or certainly with my nutrition. A lot of what we call humanely raised meat or dairy products is greenwashing, essentially. The industry wants us to believe it because they can make money selling it to ethically minded consumers who otherwise might become vegan or vegetarian. But that doesn't mean it's real. And we have a lot of incentive to want to feel good. Sometimes I was with my cousin recently who was joking about, as he was eating his cage-free chicken eggs, he was saying, well, this is the good kind. The farmers read them bedtime stories. And while I kind of wish it was true that farmers read them bedtime stories, that's not the truth with cage-free. Just to give that as an example, caged birds get about 1 square foot per bird, and there may be 5 birds in a little pen, this big. But cage-free, maybe they get the same space, but there's 10,000 birds in a giant warehouse. And then you've got free range, which is a little better. They get about 1.5 square feet per bird, maybe 2 square feet per bird. Still not enough to stretch their wings fully. They still may live their whole lives indoors. It just means they have to have access to the outdoors, which often there might be 10,000 birds in a giant warehouse with the artificial lighting. But they have a door that's open to a little tiny paddocks where they can go outside if they want to, when the weather's nice. And it's never used. And it's a tiny little space. It's 1% of the space, perhaps. Then you've got pasture raised, which are birds that have 108 square feet per bird. And they genuinely have access to the outdoors, and they genuinely run around. And that's what people think of when they think about free. That's what they think free range is. That's what they think cage-free is, but it's not. And pasture raised costs about twice as much per dozen eggs. So pasture raised then arguably would be more humane, although you've still got issues with baby male chicks being killed at birth because, of course, they don't lay eggs. You've still got issues with chickens being killed after a year or two when their production goes down and turned into chicken soup. You're still participating in all of that, but comparatively, it's a better quality of life for the bird than the other options. So everyone has to draw their own line of what they're ethically comfortable with, but the reality is that a lot of what we think of as humane really isn't so great. And the animals are still being treated pretty terribly. So if you want to know the truth, visit the farm. See what's actually happening. And if they won't let you, then that's a good sign to be very aware and very alert and very concerned. There are some folks who can find sources at farmers markets or other resources like that for genuine animals that genuinely lived on the land. You still have environmental concerns to weigh in, and you still have health concerns to weigh in at that point, because there's an overwhelming body of data showing us that consumption of processed meats, red meats, animal products in general tend to be associated with higher rates of cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's and a host of other diseases. Now, are pasture-raised or free-range or humanely raised animals better? Probably, but there isn't a lot of data to back that up for real, so we don't know for sure. And what we do know is that eating vegetables is good for you. And eating a whole foods, predominantly plant-based diet seems to be correlated with longer life expectancy and greater health for you. And sustainability-wise, it's arguable whether pasture-raised is actually better at all, because it actually can take more land to have animals grazing than to put them in confinement animal feeding operations and pump them full of hormones and antibiotics and give them grain and soy from farmland. I know it sounds horrendous, but that actually might be more efficient from a pure acres per pound of meat perspective. So at the end of the day, if we go pasture-raised, we'd have to cut down every tree on the planet to provide for current levels of human consumption, which obviously is far from sustainable. Rainforest beef is technically pasture-raised too, by the way. So I think we have to look at the ecosystems involved and what they're capable of and how they're being treated. So I think that yes, small amounts of pasture-raised meat could be sustainable, but not on the scale we're going right now.
A monoculture is a single crop repeatedly grown on the same land. So why are these food sources at risk in addition to the harm being done to the environment?
If you look at the bread basket of the United States, in the Great Plains states, they're not growing bread. They're growing corn and soy for livestock. It takes an enormous amount of land to feed the voracious appetites of humans' livestock, the animals we raise for meat and dairy and eggs. And most of that land is growing monocrops, epic-sized fields of corn and soy and sorghum and other cereal crops for us to feed the livestock. And most of those are genetically engineered. They're all being sprayed with pesticides and being pumped full of, the soil's being pumped full of artificial fertilizers to increase yields. And this is having a devastating environmental impact. So if you want to have less monocrops in the world, then shop from farmers markets and support local farms and micro-scale businesses, and absolutely, number one, eat less meat.